I want you to reflect with me, if you can, from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, where it talks about for everything there is a season. The book of Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything. There's a season for every activity in the heavens. There's a time to be born. There's a time to die. There's a time to plant, and there's a time to uproot. There's a time to kill, and there's a time to heal. There's a time to tear down, and there's a time to build. There's a time to weep, and there's a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn, and there's a time to dance. Today I want to talk from the sermonic theme, living through life's transitions. Living through life's transitions. And today the sermon is dedicated to our graduates, and also it is dedicated to the entire Peddie Church. Living through a transition. It was the year September 2021 when I had pastored the Trinity Baptist Church of Brooklyn, New York for 22 years. I led this church through some challenges. This church was a strong, vibrant church in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, New York. A strong church of about 125 members who were mostly Caribbean. And I had been their leader for 22 years. But something happened in the year 2021 that I noted that the church had moved from 125 members to about 50 faithful members. I was very critical of myself because when you are the leader, there's a temptation to blame yourself when things don't go well. But I remember that I made a decision. I began to question why the membership had dwindled. And I remember sitting with the church clerk of the church. And she said, "Pastor, when you came to this church 22 years ago, we were strong, and 125 people. And she said, I want you to know that in your 22 years of leading this church, we've lost over 85 members through death." And that hit me very hard because I had never thought of the fact that most of the members who were there when I came 22 years ago were no longer there. But I did something that was critical in September 21. I sat down with one of the faithful members of the church who had been a member of this church for 62 years. I remember calling her up on the phone, and I called her name. And I remember saying to her, "I am feeling that I need to retire." I remember saying it to her, and I remember there was silence after I said I needed to retire. I remember she did not say a word. I remember this woman who listened very carefully to her pastor. And then all of a sudden I could hear this woman crying in the background. I was asking myself, why is she crying? Because all I said is I'm thinking about retiring. But then she said something to me. She said, "Pastor, if you feel that you need to retire, you need to be obedient to God. You need to do what God tells you." And I remember that I went into prayer just like this woman had told me to do. And finally, in November of 2021, I announced to the church that I was going to retire. I had scripted, written my retirement letter. I had done everything because I am a writer, so I had written everything so well. And I remember announcing to the church in November of 2021 that I was retiring. But guess what happened? I lost it. Because there's no way you can pastor a church for 22 years and not fall in love with people. It's no way that you can retire from a church after 22 years and the people that you serve also love you. I remember I went through a transition. I remember spending my final 3 months with this church, working with my deacons and my trustees and all of the leadership of the church to pull together all of the final things that we needed to do, and we went into a transition. But after I retired, something else happened to me. I remember after I retired from this church, and I gave my keys, turned my keys in on March the 1st, 2022. I remember meeting with the chair of the Board of Trustees, my dear friend, Mrs. Earlene Hope, and I gave her my keys, and we hugged each other, and we said, this is the last time that I will come to the office of the Trinity Baptist Church. And I remember embracing my chair of the trustee board, turning my keys over. And I remember jumping in my car, driving back to New Jersey, to our home here in New Jersey, and saying, oh my God, this is the last time I will ever drive to this church again. But I learned something from that experience. I learned that we live through a transition in life. I learned that life is filled with transitions. And I learned that after I retired, Deacon Tunde, I learned that people think when you retire, that it's almost as if they think you're dead. When you tell people I'm retired, they look at you like, what's that? And I remember after I retired, I started not using the word retired. I started telling people that I am reinventing myself. So the word that I used after retirement was that Dr. Bembry, Dr. Glenn, is reinventing himself. And I would never tell people that I'm retired because most people, when I left Brooklyn, said, Bembry, I thought you were retired. It looks like you're more busy now than you were when you were a full-time pastor. I reinvented myself. I learned that life is in a transition. Why am I preaching this sermon? Because I believe that this church is also going through a transition. I believe that this Peddie church in Newark is experiencing a transition because I've been studying your history, Deacon Tunde. I've been reading, and I've found out that this church has had some great high days. But this church has also had some low times. And I've learned that there were significant pastors who were your leaders that many of you still remember. Glenn Hatfield. I remember I hear people talking about the Reverend Felix Thinkson. And then I hear people talking about Pastor Kane. And I realize that this church is in a transition period. And here I am as the interim minister trying to help you go through your transition. You know, transitions are weird times in life. Transitions are times where you have to adapt to change. Transitions are times when you have to open yourself and embrace for things that you may not like, because the writer of Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything. There's a time to weep. There's a time to dance. There's a time to cry. There's a time to weep. There's one of our great hymns that we sing in the church that says, time is filled with transitions. Trust in him who will not leave you. Covet not his world's vain riches when your journey is completed. And then the song says, hold to God's unchanging hand. So life is a transitional time. But do you ever realize that when you're young, we all were young at one time. Some of us are still young. Enjoy being young. Enjoy it. Enjoy every moment of being young. Because one day you're going to look in the mirror and say, what happened? And when I look in the mirror right now, I say, oh my Lord, I used to have a lot of hair on my head. I had the traditional afro. big head, lots of hair, and look in the mirror now, and I'm rubbing and saying, thank God I still got a little bit of hair left. I still have something to rub, Felix. Maybe you and I different, my brother. But life brings about a change. When we're young, life seems enthusiastic. It feels as if when we're young, as if life is going to be forever. I remember when I was young, I was always planning. I was a strategic planner. I was always thinking about my life, trying to excel and make something of my life. And let me tell you, when you're young, you need to plant some seeds in your life. Education is one of the seeds that every young person should be planting. Education is critical. And when you're young, you need to make sure that you plant some seeds, because when you get older, you will find yourself benefiting from all the decisions that you made from when you were young. I made some very stupid decisions when I was young. I really did. And sometimes I say to God, it's a miracle that I'm still alive. Because when I was young, I was out there. I was a little wild. I had energy. I used to love to dance, and there was a big thing in the 1970s, the disco era, where people were dancing, and I was a dancer to my heart. Now I have a little arthritis stuff that goes on, but I can still, wiggle with, if I have to, Daniel. I can still move the body, because dancing has a way of making us feel alive. When we're young, we realize that we're not going to be young forever. Did you know when you're 20 years old, one day you're going to be 30? Did you know that? Did you know that if you're 30, one day you're going to be 40? If you keep living. Did you know that one day you're going to be 50? One day you're going to be 60? You keep living, you'll be 70? Keep living, you'll be 80? Keep living, you'll be 90? And if you really live, you'll be 100. Hello, somebody. Hello, somebody. Life is all about transitions, of learning how to adapt to the transitions that we go through in life. Life is about this. My first point is that transitions teach us how to deal with change. Change is something that I don't always like. My sister and I were talking the other day about how we want to change things in our family. We're tired of doing the same old stuff. So Father's Day, which was last Sunday, my mom, when I came to the house, I said, I want all the ladies to sit down. Why did I say that? Because my mother and my sisters are used to organizing everything. They're used to cooking. I said, I'm the father. I'm the man in charge today. I said, I want all the ladies to sit down, and I'm going to serve the meal. And so thank God I had bought some food, because, I didn't have time to cook. So I brought some Indian food. I had some Chinese food. I had a little bit of everything. And my mother was like, oh, you're going to serve us, aren't you? I said, yep. Because on this Father's Day, I want us to adapt to change. And so we changed the rituals where the women did not do any cooking. And guess who cleaned up? I did. The ladies were like, look at my son. My mother was like, look at my son in the washing dishes in the sink. I was like, Mom, I know how to wash dishes. Change. If we're going to adapt to change, go through transitions, we got to adapt to change. My second point, because this Sunday is about Scholarship Sunday, I'm trying to be brief because there's a whole lot of meat I have for you. My second point is that transitions force us to grow. To grow. Where there is no growth, we die. And a lot of people are stuck in their old ways, doing the same. Some people you talk to one week and you come back and they're talking the same stuff they were talking about 2 weeks ago. because people don't like to change. But I believe that if we're going to go through a transition where Ecclesiastes says life is about seasons, we have to keep growing. Keep growing. Young people, keep growing. If you got a bachelor's degree, guess what? You can work on a master's degree. And if you got a master's degree, guess what? You can work on a PhD. Come on, somebody. Keep on growing. Let me tell you what, I have 3 earned degrees, and I'm working on another degree now in retirement because I'm realizing that I don't know everything. I'm still working to educate myself. And with God's help, in 3 years from now, I'm going to graduate with another degree. In my retirement, Deacon Tunde, I'm going to have another degree because I believe in education. You know what I've learned also is that people who tell you they know everything, you better run from those folks. We don't know everything. Education, Socrates, I taught philosophy at Bloomfield College, and Socrates was one of my great philosophers. And Socrates says, all I know is I do not know. All I know is I do not know. So education keeps teaching me how little I know and how much more there is to learn. So transitions keep us growing. And then finally, and I'm finished, transitions also teach us that there are a lot of temporal things in life. This too will pass. Everything is just temporary. Everything that we're going through is not going to last forever. You know, when I was young and I had problems, I used to think it was going to last forever. Now, when problems come, I just take a chill pill. I'm like, bring it on. Bring it on. Because I've been through a whole lot of stuff now. I have been through some stuff. And let me tell you, when you go through things in life, oh, I feel the help of God. When you go through things in life, it means that you get stronger. So the hymn that I love so much is, I love this hymn, Amazing Grace, because in this hymn, Isaac Watts says, through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. But if God's grace brought me safe this far, God's grace will lead me on. We're all here by the grace of God. We're all here by the grace of God. And because we recognize that life is going through a transition, we acknowledge that God's grace will keep us through the hard times in life. And so on that note, I'm going to end the sermon because we are acknowledging our graduates, and I hope this sermon has blessed you as we look at the transitions that we go through in life.